This is me in the fourth grade. It's the year where I was given my first opportunity to participate in a science fair. To a stereotypical gifted kid like myself, this was the perfect opportunity. I excelled in my classes, easily got top marks, and well, I was a huge STEM nerd, so surely this would just be an easy opportunity to showcase my scientific knowledge, right? I thought my project has to be groundbreaking, like curing cancer or unveiling some amazing new innovation. Naturally, after weeks and weeks of fruitless brainstorming, I realized that these ambitions were simply impossible for me to achieve at the time. Defeated, I finally had to listen to my exasperated parents' advice to just pick a simpler problem with a simpler solution. My father mentioned that he had been developing some wrinkles recently and suggested I make a solution for this. Obviously, as any 10-year-old would, I said, no, that's so lame. But it was only when he revealed to me that he had purchased a product for almost $1,000 to remedy this issue that my mind began to change. And my disdain for the project idea began to melt into a stubborn refusal to admit that the only solution to something as simple as a wrinkle could possibly be so expensive. So, my magnificent and groundbreaking project was decided. I would make a wrinkle-removing cream. I mean, I had nothing better in mind, anyways. I began crafting this anti-wrinkle, skin-tightening cream with just paper plates, plastic utensils, and powders and tools that I begged my mother to buy me from Amazon in the basement of my own home. The concept was as simple as this. The water-based cream would be applied to the skin, where the water would evaporate and it would dry, causing it to contract and pull the skin together, effectively reducing the appearance of wrinkles for a temporary period of time. But here's where it all changed. This project began to show more depth than I'd ever anticipated. Though my equipment was makeshift and the concept was basic at best, there was still so much work to be done. And as I worked on this project, I discovered that I began to enjoy the process. Making these projects became a newfound and unparalleled source of enjoyment. I continued to refine these kinds of projects at my home throughout elementary school, and a fascinating journey soon began to unfold. Making these projects not only became one of my favorite activities, but it helped me find what else I could possibly be interested in, using science to help others. Alongside this, I soon started looking beyond just non-competitive elementary school science fairs. I wanted to go to the next level, where only middle and high school students could compete, the regional Waterloo-Wellington Science and Engineering Fair. So the year is 2020, and I'm in the 7th grade, just old enough to compete at the regional fair. Deciding to follow my interest in creating healthcare solutions, I developed a modular wound dressing. And when I say modular, I just mean that there were several specific components that worked to achieve specific properties. I toil away at my project, determined to win an award. But there was just one catch. We all know what happened in March of 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic ravaged the world, and among its consequences, one of them was that science fairs were effectively canceled. I was devastated. I wouldn't get to show off my findings, talk to judges, or win prizes. I didn't want to wait a whole nother year. Well, unfortunately, that's exactly what I had to do. But there is a silver lining. When 2021 rolled around and the fair made its return, albeit virtually, I also returned with a renewed passion. To my surprise, my project won best in my division, but more importantly, I won what was called an Award of Merit. And this is a ticket to the next rung up on the science fair ladder, the Canada-wide Science Fair, which is an annual gathering of the top youth STEM projects from all across the country. And despite being virtual, I had an absolutely amazing time with the fair. And I even won a few awards, including a Gold Excellence Award and a Challenge Award in my category. I promised myself that I would come back even better next year and win something even greater. But I didn't come back to the Canada-wide Science Fair. Because on a random day in November of 2021, I opened my computer to be greeted with an email, and it was titled, Apply for Team Canada ICEF 2022. For those of you who don't know, Regeneron ICEF, or the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, is an annual gathering of the world's best youth scientists. It's a whole level above the Canada-wide Science Fair. I had heard it mentioned as just the coolest science fair ever, the pinnacle of high school research, the Olympics of science fair even. So the prospect of applying, let alone getting in, when only 8 projects from the country were accepted to go each year, seemed far-fetched at best. But after some deep consideration, which is to say 30 seconds of daydreaming about going to ISEF, I came to the conclusion that I might as well try. I mean, what would be the harm? I knew that if I wanted to get a shot at going to ISEF, I would have to step it up. And so, I decided to leave the familiar environment of my home basement where I had developed all of my previous projects and enter a university lab. And after emails, forms, and training, well, you get the point, I could finally start my project. Again, a wound dressing, but this time completely different in purpose and design. I used hydrogels, a unique type of water-based solid, to create a wound dressing that aimed to close wounds and stop bleeding. In order to do this, my material had to be stretchy, but not too weak. It had to be strong, but not stiff. So after months of development, my creation turned from jelly that just fell apart in your hands to stretching as far as my arms could possibly pull it. Presentation making, practicing interviews, and laggy test calls soon brought me to selection day, and I made it. I was going to ISEF. The experience was absolutely amazing, don't get me wrong. And I met some incredibly talented, like-minded young scientists, but for some reason I walked out of the event a little bit disappointed. I mean, for one, I hadn't won anything, and who doesn't want a cool, shiny new medal? And second, I had once again attended virtually due to the pandemic. So, this wasn't over. It was me against the virus, and I would achieve my goal of going to a fair, no, scratch that, of going to Regeneron ISEF specifically in person. And so, I returned to the lab more incensed than ever to create. And what was it that I actually created? In this most recent year, I developed a sensor for tissue hypoxia. Tissue hypoxia is the condition that results when your cells receive insufficient oxygen to survive. And thus, they're eventually damaged or even die. And this can happen for a variety of reasons, including cardiovascular or heart, and pulmonary or lung diseases. Because hypoxia can have severe consequences if it goes unnoticed, and it can also indicate other underlying health issues with devastating effects, it's essential that it's detected as soon as possible. I thought to myself, well, the best way to detect something the moment it happens is to continuously monitor for it before it can even start. And thus, this led me to create my innovation. It's a wearable, non-invasive tissue hypoxia sensor made of two functional components. First, I used the hydrogels from last year's project to monitor the sweat lactate levels. Now, lactate is just a chemical that's produced by your cells in the absence of oxygen, in other words, in hypoxic conditions. When exposed to lactate, the gel changes color from clear to blue and eventually brown. And the more severe the hypoxia, the more lactate is produced, and thus the darker the color. Second, I used something called near-infrared spectroscopy to directly measure how much oxygen was in tissue blood. And don't worry, while this term may sound like fancy scientific mumbo-jumbo, all it means is that when I say spectroscopy, I'm shining various wavelengths of light into an individual's skin and measuring how much comes back out. Using that information, I can estimate how much was absorbed by certain molecules in your skin, and those molecules tell me how well oxygenated your blood is. And when I say near-infrared, I just mean that the specific wavelengths of light that I used to do this were in a range of wavelengths called the near-infrared range, which is near the bottom of the visual spectrum. So, by combining these methods, my sensor can easily and accurately detect the onset of tissue hypoxia. So, after even more rigorous development, presentation making, and practice interviews than ever before, and okay, maybe some late-night cry sessions over failed experiments, it was once again time for that dreaded but fateful day, selection day. A few hours after my interviews, my phone buzzed and my heart leapt into my throat as I flipped it over. Was this the call? Could the next 15 seconds change absolutely everything? No, it was my mom, who's joined us here today, calling me as a prank. But don't worry. 30 minutes later, it happened, the real deal. I was going to ISEF again, and this time not through a screen. It was hands down one of the best experiences of my entire life. I will never forget laughing hysterically with newfound friends, or attending the fair's incredible events and ceremonies, and most of all, just standing in that colossal exhibition hall, thinking to myself, I really did it. I'm really here. Even the countless practice interviews, nervous pacing, and shimmying into formal wear have become fond memories. And when judging day rolled around, I found that magically my anxiety melted into excitement as I shared my findings with the judges. It was only 2 days after being judged that I could hardly believe it as my name was called during the awards ceremony as the recipient of a grand award. I mean, it didn't feel real at all. And as I stood on that stage to accept my award, I thought of a little girl and her wrinkle-reducing cream. And in that moment, I realized that there was no eureka moment, no magnificent transformation or realization of potential. It was nothing but embracing simplicity that catalyzed my growth. It's only human and never a detriment to dream of being great. We wish to have the deepest knowledge, the most transformative work, or sometimes even the most awards. But in order to get there, we have to take the first few steps. We have to be simple and embrace being simple. When we are young, before we can learn to walk, we learn to crawl. Only when crawling becomes easier can we walk. And only when we can walk confidently can we begin to run. Why should approaching our goals be any different? So start simple. Because simple ideas are clear ideas. Clear ideas are actionable ideas, and action is the singular driving force behind innovation and growth. In the same vein, it will not be the convoluted and difficult to do practices, but the straightforward and easily repeatable ones that will yield you progress. Make a point of finding time to just share and discuss your ideas with others around you. Continuously learn a few new things each day, or simply make yourself the space to write, create, brainstorm, or revise freely, even if only for just 15, 30 minutes a day. Give yourself the chance to experiment and experience, and you will truly be unstoppable. So, regardless of what passions you choose to pursue, I ask of you this. Don't hesitate. Start taking the simple steps, and never stop reaching for the stars. Thank you.